Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there lived a little girl who was so sweet and pretty and good that everybody loved her. Her old grandmother, who was very fond of her, made her a little red cloak and hood, which suited her so well that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother told her to take a basket with some butter and eggs and fresh baked cake to her grandmother, who was ill. The little girl, who was always willing and obliging, ran at once to fetch her red cloak, and taking her basket, set out on her journey. Now the way lay through a great wood, and she was so delighted at the mosses and ferns, the birds and butterflies, and the wild roses in the thicket, that she did not hurry, but often stopped to look around. She met some woodcutters, friends of her father's, and watched them at their work. When she had said good-bye to them, one of these men said, "I did not think of it, but we ought to have warned Little Red Riding Hood that there is a wolf in the wood." "She will be all right if she hurries," the other replied. "The wolf is nervous of us and lies low when we are about. Still, when we have finished this tree, we will follow her to make sure." The tree took longer than they expected. Red Riding Hood had gone on meanwhile, and was surprised to find, on turning a corner, what she thought was a large dog sitting beside a path. But she was quite pleased when it spoke to her. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood. Where are you off to so early?" Little Red Riding Hood, who did not know it was a wolf, replied, "I'm going to see my grandmother, who is ill in bed, to take her some butter and eggs and a fresh baked cake that my mother has made for her." "Where does your grandmother live?" asked the wolf. "In the little white cottage at the other side of the wood," answered Red Riding Hood. "Well," said the wolf, "I'm going that way too. If you will let me, I will walk part of the way with you." So Little Red Riding Hood, who suspected no harm, set off with the wolf for her companion. The woodcutters' axes could be heard in the distance. Presently she stopped to gather wild flowers, and the wolf, who had much wished to eat her up and had thought of a plan, said, "Good morning," and trotted away. As soon as he was out of sight, he ran as fast as he could to the grandmother's cottage and knocked at the door. Who is there?" asked the old grandmother as she lay in bed. "It is Little Red Riding Hood," answered the wolf. "I have brought you some butter and eggs and a fresh baked cake which mother has made for you." "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up," said the old grandmother. The wolf crept in and went upstairs. There was no time for him to lose. He made one bound at the poor old grandmother and ate her up before she knew what had happened. Then he put on her nightcap and got into bed and lay down to wait for Red Riding Hood. The little girl, entranced with pleasure at finding squirrels who fed on acorns from her hand, had loitered more and more. Her bright red cloak attracted the animals in the wood, and even a timid hare came for a morsel from her basket. As for the wood pigeons, they fluttered around cooing for crumbs. They did not want her to go. So it was a long time before she got to her grandmother's cottage. She tapped softly on the door and heard a gruff voice say, "Who is there?" "It is Little Red Riding Hood, grandmother dear. I have brought you some butter and eggs and a fresh baked cake which mother has made for you." The wolf answered, disguising his voice as much as he could, "Pull the bobbin and the latch will go up." So Little Red Riding Hood pulled the bobbin and went inside. "Good morning, dear grandmother," she said. "How are you feeling today?" Very bad indeed, my dear," answered the wolf, trying to hide himself under the bedclothes. "How strange and hoarse your voice sounds, grandmother," said the little girl. "I've got a very bad cold, my dear," said the wicked wolf. "Grandmother, what very bright eyes you have," went on Red Riding Hood, surprised to see how strange her grandmother looked in her night clothes. "The better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. All this time he was staring at her, thinking how tender she would be to eat, and the little girl was beginning to get a little bit frightened. She had never seen her grandmother look like this. "Grandmother, what very big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child." "Grandmother, what very long arms you have." "The better to hug you with, my dear." "But, grandmother, what great big teeth you have," said Red Riding Hood, suddenly becoming terrified. "The better to eat you with," roared the wolf, jumping out of bed. Little Red Riding Hood shrieked aloud and ran for her life. Luckily the wolf became entangled in the bedclothes, and before he was free she had got downstairs and was trying to open the front door. Then the wolf came for her. Meanwhile, the two woodcutters, following Red Riding Hood as they said they would, had just heard the little girl shriek. Running as hard as they could, they arrived just in time. The wolf had seized her when there was a loud crash. The door flew open and in rushed the woodcutters armed with their axes. The wolf gave a howl, but there was no escape for him. 1, 2, 3 blows, and he was dead. Little Red Riding Hood fell weeping into the arms of the men who had saved her. They comforted her and took her home to tell her mother all about her terrible adventure. And never again did she mistake a wolf for a large dog.